I never expected to find myself in this position. My name is Jacob Smith and I've been married to Emma for 5 years. We lived what I thought was a pretty perfect life, comfortable, predictable, happy. A steady job, a nice house, and we both had good friends. From the outside, everything looked perfect and I had no reason to believe it wasn't. We were the couple people envied, at least that's what I thought. I've always trusted Emma. She's beautiful, driven, intelligent, the kind of woman who could have any man she wanted, but she chose me. I never felt like I had to worry. We never had major arguments, and though I did work long hours, she seemed happy. I always tried to show her I appreciated her, even if I didn't always have time to be around. She understood. Or so I thought. That all changed one Saturday afternoon when I found myself in a situation I never thought I would face. It was a busy weekend and Emma had been running around all morning getting ready for a dinner with some friends. We were in a rush, and as I grabbed my keys, I noticed her purse left unattended on the kitchen table. Normally, I wouldn't have thought twice about it, but something about the sight of the bag, unzipped and just sitting there, caught my attention. It was strange because she was always so careful about her things, especially her purse. In a moment of pure curiosity, I walked over and zipped the bag back up. But then my fingers brushed against something hard inside. A phone. I froze. Now, I've always been the type to respect boundaries, to never invade her privacy, but something about this phone didn't sit right with me. It wasn't her usual one, not the one she used every day. This was a sleek, small device that I had never seen before. My heart rate quickened. Why would she have a second phone, especially one that seemed so well hidden? I hesitated for a moment. It could have been nothing, right? But my gut told me that something was off. Maybe it was her work phone or some old device she used when we first started dating. Or maybe she just forgot about it. But I couldn't ignore the knot in my stomach, the sense that something wasn't quite right. So I did something I never thought I would do. I picked up the phone and unlocked it. I was immediately hit by a wave of dread. The screen was filled with messages, hundreds of them. The first few were relatively innocuous, but the deeper I scrolled, the more uncomfortable I became. They weren't from friends, family, or coworkers. No, these messages were from someone I didn't recognize. A name that hadn't come up in any of our conversations. My hands trembled as I read through the texts. They were friendly at first, but the more I read, the clearer it became that something wasn't right. There was an macy to the way they spoke to each other, an underlying flirtation that I had never seen between Emma and anyone else. The messages were long and frequent, and while nothing explicitly pointed to a physical affair, it felt undeniable. They talked about how much they missed each other, how they couldn't wait to meet again, how things were so complicated in their lives but that they had something special. It felt like they were speaking in code, something neither of them wanted to say out loud. I felt a lump form in my throat as I read further. I didn't know what I was expecting, but I didn't expect this. It was like I had stumbled upon a secret world, one that Emma had been hiding from me for who knows how long. I didn't know who this person was, but there was no mistaking the tone of the messages. They weren't just friendly. They weren't just casual. There was something more. Something more than what I had with Emma. I felt sick and I wanted to scream, but I couldn't. My mind was racing. Who was this person? What had been going on behind my back? Why hadn't she told me? I felt betrayed, confused, and alone. But I knew that getting emotional right now wouldn't help me figure things out. I had to stay calm, to gather more information before jumping to conclusions. My mind kept telling me that I needed to confront her, but another part of me told me to wait, to think this through. Emma was upstairs, getting ready. I thought about how easily she would have brushed this off if I had confronted her right away. I could already hear her excuses, the way she would try to explain it away. It would be all about work or how she was just being friendly, how it wasn't what it seemed. I didn't want to hear it. I wanted the truth. I decided I wouldn't confront her just yet. I wasn't ready to make accusations I couldn't back up. I needed time to process this, to figure out my next steps. So, I tucked the phone back into her purse, zipped it up, and left the room. I needed to keep my composure. I didn't want her to suspect anything. The rest of the day felt like a blur. We went about our usual routine. Emma seemed oblivious to the storm that had just begun in my mind. She joked around, made small talk, and acted as though everything was perfectly fine. I played along, though inside I was falling apart. I couldn't stop thinking about the phone, about the messages. I kept thinking of all the little signs I had missed, how she had been acting distant lately, how she had been spending more time at work, how she had started going out more, leaving me to stay home alone. Later that night, after dinner, I finally confronted her. We were sitting on the couch, watching TV, when I couldn't hold it in anymore. I turned to her, holding the phone in my hand. "Emma, whose phone is this?" I asked, my voice steady but tinged with frustration. Her face went pale for a second and then her usual calm demeanor kicked in. "Oh, that's just an old one I keep around," she said, almost too quickly. "I haven't used it in ages. It's nothing really. I didn't buy it." "You've never mentioned it before," I said, my voice a little firmer this time. "Why keep a second phone? And why is it hidden in your purse like it's a secret?" She let out a nervous laugh, her eyes darting away. "Jacob, it's nothing. I promise. I just keep it around for emergencies or if my work phone dies. It's not a big deal." But the way she said it, the way she shifted the conversation toward my work didn't sit right with me. It was too rehearsed, too perfect. She was avoiding the question. I wanted to push harder, to demand the truth, but I knew it wouldn't work. She was good at deflecting, at turning the tables. And I didn't want to fight right then. I needed more time to process everything, to think clearly. The last thing I wanted was to make a scene or accuse her of something without concrete proof. So I let it go. For now. But my gut told me there was more going on than I could see. And deep down, I knew I couldn't keep ignoring the signs. I spent the rest of the night lying awake in bed, staring at the ceiling. The image of the phone, of the messages, was burned into my mind. And for the first time in years, I didn't know if I could trust the person lying next to me. The next few weeks felt like I was walking through a fog. I couldn't stop thinking about the phone, the messages, and the overwhelming sense that something wasn't right. I kept telling myself that I was overreacting, that I was just being paranoid. After all, Emma had reassured me that it was nothing. But there was that nagging feeling in the back of my mind, the feeling that I had missed something important. The little things she said, the way she acted, it didn't add up. The first sign that something was off came a few days after I found the phone. Emma started staying late at work more often. It wasn't anything extraordinary at first, just a few late nights here and there which she attributed to deadlines or meetings with colleagues. I didn't think much of it at the time. After all, she had always been dedicated to her job and I had no reason to question that. But then it became more frequent. She'd come home late, sometimes after 9 p.m., sometimes even later, and when I asked how her day had been, she'd always give a vague response, busy, or a lot to catch up on. There were no specifics, no details about the people she was working with or the projects she was handling. It was like she was trying to keep things vague and it made me uneasy. One Friday night, she came home especially late, around 11 p.m. She was dressed in her work clothes, but her makeup had been freshly touched up and her hair, which should have been slightly messy from the day, was smooth and styled as if she had just come from a salon. When I asked her where she had been, she gave a quick, rehearsed answer. "I stayed later to finish up the presentation." It ran a little longer than expected. I didn't say anything at the time. I just nodded, but inside I could feel my trust in her beginning to slip. It wasn't the lateness that bothered me, it was the lack of transparency, the way she avoided being specific, the subtle shift in her behavior. She had always been open with me about her work. She used to tell me about the people she worked with, the things she was doing, even the frustrations she had. But now, there was this wall between us and I didn't know how to break it down. Another strange thing started happening. She became increasingly protective of her phone. She started keeping it on her at all times. Whenever we were together, she'd put it face down on the table or she'd leave the room if she got a message, even though she never used to be that secretive about her phone. And if I asked her about it, she would laugh it off. "Just work stuff, nothing interesting," she'd say, as if it was no big deal. But the more she brushed it off, the more suspicious I became. One evening, I came home early from work. I wasn't expecting Emma to be home yet, but when I walked through the door, I was surprised to find her in the living room. She was sitting on the couch, her phone in hand, but as soon as she saw me, she quickly placed it face down on the coffee table and sat up straighter, almost like she was startled. "Hey," I said, trying to sound casual. "I thought you'd be at that meeting with your team." She smiled, but there was something about her smile that felt forced, like she was trying too hard to appear calm. "I finished early. Decided to come home. How was your day?" I sat down across from her, watching her carefully. "Same as usual," I said, trying to keep the conversation light. But there was a tension in the air, a quiet discomfort that made my chest tighten. "You seem a little distracted." She laughed again, but it sounded hollow. "I'm just tired, that's all. You know how it is." I nodded, but my mind was already racing. I watched her as she picked up her phone again, glancing at it quickly before placing it down again. Something wasn't right. The way she was acting, her nervous energy, her sudden disinterest in me, it all felt off. Later that evening, I had the opportunity to check her phone again. She had left it on the kitchen counter while she went to the bathroom. I didn't want to invade her privacy, but I couldn't stop myself. My hand shook as I picked it up and I felt a wave of guilt wash over me, but I knew I had to find out what was going on. I opened her messages and scrolled through them, searching for anything that would explain her behavior. There were more texts from the same person, texts that were increasingly flirtatious, some that were borderline suggestive. The messages were filled with inside jokes, nicknames, and references to things I had never heard of. At one point, the conversation even mentioned meeting up over the weekend, though no specific plans were made. I felt sick. My heart pounded in my chest and my hands went clammy. I couldn't believe what I was reading. It wasn't just work and it wasn't just friendly conversation. There was something going on, something more. I didn't know how long it had been going on, but I knew one thing for sure: Emma was hiding something from me. I put the phone back, my mind racing. How could she do this to me? To us? I wanted to confront her right then and there, but I knew that would only make things worse. I needed more evidence, more clarity. I couldn't confront her with just my suspicions. I had to be sure. The following days were a blur. I watched Emma closely, looking for any more signs, any cracks in her story. And sure enough, there were more. She continued to stay late at work, and on weekends she began leaving for errands or work-related events. Each time she would be gone for hours, and when she returned, she was always vague about where she had been. Her answers never lined up with what I knew of her schedule, and each time I found myself more and more suspicious. One evening I decided to take matters into my own hands. I wanted to know what was really going on, so I decided to follow her. It wasn't something I was proud of, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was missing something. I needed to know for sure. Emma had told me she was going out for dinner with colleagues, but she didn't mention where or with whom. That evening she dressed up in a way that seemed a little too much for a casual dinner. She wore a dress I hadn't seen before, something a bit too fancy for a typical work outing. I waited for her to leave, then I grabbed my keys and followed her. My heart pounded in my chest as I drove behind her car, keeping a safe distance, hoping she wouldn't notice. She drove for about 20 minutes before pulling into a secluded parking lot near a fancy restaurant. I recognized it immediately. It was a place I'd seen her go to only for special occasions, a place where she and I had celebrated anniversaries. I parked a block away, my mind racing. I knew this wasn't normal. This wasn't just a dinner with colleagues. I watched as she stepped out of her car, adjusting her dress before walking into the restaurant. She wasn't alone. I saw him then. The man from the messages. He was waiting for her by the door, a smile on his face as she walked toward him. He looked like a professional, well-dressed, but his familiarity with her was unsettling. I saw them hug, and that hug lasted just a little too long. There was a moment where their bodies were pressed too closely together, and I could see Emma's face, her smile, the way she looked at him. It wasn't just a hug between two friends. I felt a rush of anger and betrayal, but I didn't act. I couldn't. I stayed in the car, watching them enter the restaurant together, and for the first time in my life, I felt completely powerless. This was it. This was the proof I had been looking for. As I sat there, I realized I had never been more sure of anything in my life. Emma was having an affair, and now I had to figure out what to do with that knowledge. I didn't know how to confront her, how to process this, or even if I was ready to face the truth. But I knew one thing: I wasn't going to sit back and let her continue living this lie. It was time for me to take control of the situation, even if it meant facing the most painful truth I had ever known. To be continued. The hours that followed that night felt like they stretched on forever. I sat in my car, staring at the restaurant, my stomach in knots. I watched as Emma and the man, the one I had seen in her messages, walked into the building hand in hand. It wasn't a friendly handshake or a casual greeting. No, this was something more, an asterisk mate, a connection that I had never seen between her and anyone else. The thought of her with him gnawed at my insides. My mind replayed the hug over and over again, the way they embraced, the way she smiled at him, like she was happy to see him, excited even. It was a look I hadn't seen on her face in months, at least not when she looked at me. I should have left. I should have driven away and given myself time to think, time to process everything. But I couldn't. I needed to know more. I needed to see what was really happening. The restaurant had large windows, and I could see them through the reflection of the glass. Emma and the man sat down at a cozy corner table, their conversation animated. She was laughing at something he said. Her laugh, that familiar sound, suddenly seemed so distant, so foreign. I had never felt more like an outsider in my own marriage than I did in that moment. I tried to keep my emotions in check, but it was hard. It was as if a veil had been lifted from my eyes and I could finally see the truth. This wasn't just a one-time mistake. This was a pattern. Emma had been hiding this from me, and now there was no denying it. I didn't want to stay and watch them. I didn't want to see more of their in**mate moments, more of the lies that had been playing out behind my back. But I couldn't look away. I needed to see how far this had gone. I needed the confirmation that I wasn't just imagining things, that I wasn't some paranoid fool. The night dragged on. I watched as they ate their meal, talked, and laughed like two people who had been together for years, not two people who had just started seeing each other. The chemistry between them was undeniable. There was no mistaking it. I couldn't stop the wave of betrayal that crashed over me. Every smile, every shared joke, every touch, it was like a punch to my gut. Eventually, they stood up to leave. As Emma and the man walked out of the restaurant, I couldn't stop myself from following them, keeping a safe distance, trying to stay hidden in the shadows. They didn't go to a car together, though. Instead, they walked to the hotel across the street. I watched as they entered the lobby, their hands still clasped together. It hit me like a ton of bricks. They weren't just having dinner. They were staying together. And the worst part was, I didn't know how long this had been going on. How many nights had she spent with him, lying to me, telling me she was working late, or that she had other things to do? How many times had she kissed me goodnight, promising she would see me tomorrow, while all along she had been with him? I couldn't breathe. The weight of it all was crushing, suffocating. I sat there, unable to move, unable to think clearly. The reality of what was happening hit me all at once, and I felt like I was losing control of everything. Eventually, I started my car and drove home. I didn't know what else to do. My mind was racing. What was I supposed to do now? How was I supposed to face Emma? Was there even a way to fix this? I couldn't stop thinking about the look on her face when she saw me follow her to the restaurant. Would she be surprised? Or was she so far gone that she wouldn't even care? I parked in the driveway, but I didn't go inside immediately. I sat there in the car, staring at the house, wondering if it was even my home anymore. My mind was clouded with thoughts of Emma and the man, their time together, the betrayal that had been unfolding right under my nose. I didn't know if I was ready to face her, but I knew that I had to. When I finally walked through the door, it felt like everything had changed. The house, which had once felt like a warm and welcoming place, now felt cold and empty. The silence was deafening. I could hear the soft hum of the refrigerator, the ticking of the clock on the wall, but it all felt distant. It felt like I was walking into a stranger's home. I found Emma sitting on the couch, her back turned to me. She was scrolling through her phone, her fingers moving quickly over the screen. She didn't even hear me come in. I stood there for a moment, taking in the scene. She looked so normal, so calm. It was as if nothing had changed. But I knew everything had changed. "Emma," I said, my voice hoarse. She looked up, surprised. "Oh, Jacob, you're home early," she said, smiling as if nothing was wrong. I couldn't keep it in any longer. I couldn't pretend everything was fine. "Where were you tonight, Emma?" I asked, my voice shaking. Her smile faltered. "What do you mean?" "I saw you," I said, the words spilling out of me. "I saw you with him. I saw you at the restaurant. I followed you." She froze, her eyes widening. For a moment, there was complete silence. She didn't know what to say. Her lips parted, but no words came out. I could see the panic in her eyes, the realization that she had been caught. She opened her mouth to speak again, but I didn't let her. "I've been watching you," I said, my voice gaining strength. "I've been watching you lie to me day after day. And now I know everything. I saw you with him. I saw how you looked at him. Don't try to deny it, Emma. I know what's going on." She opened her mouth, but no words came out. She was trembling now, her hands shaking as she put her phone down. I could see her guilt, but I didn't feel any satisfaction from it. All I felt was a hollow emptiness. A part of me wanted to scream, to demand answers, but I stayed silent. I needed her to say it, to admit it. "Please," she finally whispered. "Jacob, I never meant for it to happen. I never meant for any of this." Her voice broke, but I couldn't bring myself to comfort her. This wasn't about her pain. This was about the truth that had been staring me in the face for weeks, a truth I couldn't deny any longer. "You've been lying to me," I said, the weight of the words heavy on my chest. "How long has this been going on, Emma?" She looked away, unable to meet my gaze. The silence between us stretched on, suffocating. I felt like I was drowning in the knowledge of what she had done, of how she had betrayed me. I don't know how to explain," she said, her voice barely a whisper. I shook my head. "You don't need to explain, Emma. I already know. I just need you to admit it. Admit what you've been doing. Admit that you've been with him, that you've been lying to me this whole time." She collapsed into the couch, her face buried in her hands. I could hear her sobbing softly, but I didn't feel sorry for her. Not anymore. I had no idea how long this had been going on, but I knew one thing for sure: everything had changed. I stood there watching her cry, but I felt nothing. I had spent so long trying to convince myself that it was all in my head, that I was just being paranoid. But now the truth was undeniable. She had betrayed me. And there was no going back. The following days after Emma's confession felt like a blur. I was walking around in a daze, processing everything I had learned, everything I had seen. The truth of it all was overwhelming, suffocating. It wasn't just the affair itself, it was the lies, the deceit, the years of trust that had been shattered. The woman I had built a life with, the person I had trusted more than anyone, had betrayed me in the worst way possible. And now I had to figure out what to do with that knowledge. Emma, of course, apologized over and over again. She was desperate to explain, to justify her actions. She told me that it wasn't about love, that it had been a mistake, that she had felt lonely and disconnected. She claimed that she had never meant to hurt me, that it was all just a temporary lapse in judgment. But as I listened to her, I couldn't help but feel the growing distance between us. The words didn't matter anymore. The trust was gone. And once trust is gone, there's nothing left to hold a relationship together. In the days that followed, Emma tried everything she could to make it up to me. She begged for forgiveness, even suggested that we go to therapy together. She said she was willing to do whatever it took to fix things, to make things right. But I couldn't bring myself to believe her. It wasn't just the affair that broke me, it was the realization that I had been living a lie for so long. The person I thought I knew had been hiding things from me, had been keeping secrets, had been living in a way that I could never have imagined. I spent those days in a haze, trying to figure out what to do. My mind was constantly racing, going back and forth between staying and confronting her, or just walking away. I wasn't sure what was right anymore. All I knew was that I couldn't stay in that house. I couldn't stay in a place that was filled with lies and betrayal. So, one evening I made the decision. I wasn't going to confront Emma again, I wasn't going to try to fix things with her. I wasn't going to spend another minute in that house, surrounded by the memories of what we had lost. I packed my things, everything I needed for the next chapter of my life, and left. I didn't tell Emma where I was going. I didn't leave a note. I just packed my bags, withdrew some money from our joint account, grabbed my passport, and walked out the door. It was the hardest thing I've ever done. But at the same time, it felt like a weight had been lifted off my chest. The thought of starting over, of leaving behind the life I had known, was terrifying, but it also felt like a fresh start. Felt like I could finally breathe again. I moved to Portland, Oregon. It wasn't some grand plan, it was more of an impulse. I had always liked the idea of living somewhere more relaxed, somewhere that was completely different from the life I had known. I rented a small apartment in a quiet neighborhood and started working at a local garden center. It wasn't glamorous, but it was peaceful. It was exactly what I needed. The first few days in Portland were hard. I didn't know anyone, and I felt like an outsider in a city full of strangers. But there was a strange comfort in the anonymity. I could walk down the street without anyone knowing my name, without anyone asking about my past. I didn't have to pretend to be something I wasn't. I was just another person trying to make it through the day. The garden center was a good distraction. I spent my days tending to plants, watering flowers, and helping customers with their landscaping needs. The work was simple, but it gave me a sense of purpose. It gave me something to focus on other than the pain I was feeling. I didn't think about Emma, or the life we had shared, or the betrayal. I just focused on the soil, the plants, the flowers. It was grounding in a way I hadn't expected. In the evenings, I would go for long walks through the city, exploring the neighborhoods, finding new places to eat, and getting to know the rhythm of Portland. There was something calming about it. The hustle and bustle of the city was different from what I was used to. It wasn't the frantic pace of my old life. It wasn't about status or ambition or work. It was about enjoying the moment, about living in a way that felt real, that felt honest. I didn't rush into anything. I didn't date, I didn't try to fill the emptiness with distractions. I just took it one day at a time, letting the city and the people I met help me heal. It wasn't easy, but it was exactly what I needed. I wasn't running away from my problems. I was giving myself the space to find peace, to find a new direction. It was a way of starting over, without the weight of my past holding me down. Over time, I started to feel more at ease. I found a sense of calm that I hadn't felt in years. I stopped looking over my shoulder, stopped wondering if Emma would reach out, if she would try to find me. I stopped caring about the past and started thinking about what I wanted for my future. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was living someone else's life. I was living my own. I eventually met someone, a woman named Sarah, who worked at a local art gallery. She was kind, patient, and understanding. She didn't rush me into anything, but she respected my space, my need for time. We started talking, meeting for coffee, and slowly, I began to open up to her. I didn't expect anything from our conversations, but with Sarah, I felt like I could be myself again. There was no pressure, no expectation. She simply listened, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was heard. With Sarah, there was no fear of betrayal, no fear of dishonesty. It was refreshing. She wasn't trying to fix me. She wasn't trying to make me forget the past. She simply let me be who I was, someone who was still recovering, still figuring things out. And that was enough. I didn't rush into a relationship with Sarah. I wasn't ready for that. But I started to believe that maybe, just maybe, I could trust again. Maybe, just maybe, I could find love without the baggage of the past. I wasn't looking for someone to replace Emma, but rather, I was looking for someone who could help me move forward. Someone who could accept me as I was, with all my flaws and imperfections. Months went by, and I continued to build my new life in Portland. I didn't think about Emma every day, but there were moments, quiet moments, when memories would surface. Sometimes, I would think about the life we had shared, the dreams we had built together. And in those moments, I would allow myself to feel the pain, to acknowledge the loss. But then I would let it go. I had learned that there was no point in holding on to the past, in trying to change what had happened. All I could do was move forward. I had started to see a therapist, someone who helped me unpack the emotional weight of the betrayal and the heartbreak. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. I had to face the anger, the sadness, the feelings of inadequacy. I had to learn how to trust myself again, how to trust that I was worthy of love, that I was deserving of happiness. The therapy sessions helped me realize that the pain I was feeling wasn't just about the affair. It was about everything that came before it. It was about the ways I had neglected myself, the ways I had let my identity become tangled with someone else's. I had lost myself in the relationship, in the marriage, and I had to find a way to rediscover who I was outside of it. As the months turned into a year, I began to feel like a different person. I wasn't the same man who had walked out of the house in the middle of the night, devastated and broken. I was stronger now, more confident. I had rebuilt my life from the ground up, piece by piece, and while I wasn't perfect, I had learned to be content with who I was. I still missed certain things about my old life, certain moments with Emma, the times when things felt easy, when we were in sync. But those feelings no longer consumed me. They no longer defined me. I had created something new, something just for me. And for the first time in a long time, I was excited about the future. To be continued. Months had passed since I moved to Portland. I had started to feel like myself again, finding comfort in the simplicity of my new life. I didn't think about Emma every day anymore, and I certainly didn't spend my nights lying awake, replaying everything that had happened in our marriage. But occasionally her memory would slip into my thoughts like a shadow in the corner of my mind, reminding me of what I had lost. I was still cautious about my interactions with people. I had learned not to rush into anything. And while I had met Sarah and we had begged *N to form a connection, I hadn't allowed myself to fully open up to her yet. I was still healing. I wasn't ready for anything serious. But the idea of love, of trust, was slowly starting to seem possible again. Then, one evening, everything changed. I was sitting in my apartment, finishing up a quiet dinner when I heard a knock on the door. I wasn't expecting anyone, and it felt strange. I stood up, hesitated for a moment, and walked over to the door. When I opened it, I was met with a sight I hadn't anticipated. A letter. It was from Emma. At first, I didn't know how to react. My stomach twisted in knots as I stared at the envelope in my hands. It had been months since I had heard from her. Part of me wanted to toss it in the trash, to forget about her entirely, to move on and not look back. But another part of me was curious. What did she want? Why was she reaching out after everything? I closed the door behind me and sat down at the kitchen table. The letter was neatly folded and the handwriting was unmistakably hers. It was almost surreal to see it again, to hold something from her after so long. I ran my fingers over the paper, thinking about the person I once knew so in *mately. Emma had been my everything. Now here I was, holding something from her, and yet it felt like holding a relic from a past life. I opened the envelope slowly, unfolded the paper, and began to read. Dear Jacob, I hope this letter finds you well. I don't expect you to respond, and I completely understand if you don't even want to read this. I've been thinking about you for so long now, and I feel like there's something I need to say. Something I owe you. I know I've hurt you beyond measure. I know that no words can undo the damage I've caused, and I don't expect you to forgive me, not now and maybe not ever. But I want you to know that I regret everything. I've spent so much time thinking about what happened between us, and I've come to realize just how much I've lost. How much we both lost. I made a mistake, Jacob. I'm not trying to excuse my actions, and I'm not looking for your forgiveness. But I need you to know that I never intended to hurt you. I never wanted to break us. But somewhere along the way, I lost sight of everything that mattered. And for that, I'm deeply sorry. I've learned so much about myself since we parted ways. I've had time to reflect on everything, the affair, my choices, and the way I neglected our relationship. The truth is, I don't think I was ever truly honest with myself, let alone with you. I let fear and loneliness drive my decisions. But those are no excuses for what I did. I don't know what's next for me. I don't know what the future holds. But I'm reaching out now not to ask for forgiveness, but to tell you that I've changed. I'm different. And I want you to know that I will always regret the way things ended between us. I'm not asking for a second chance. I'm not asking for you to come back to me. I just want you to know that I see what I lost. And I will carry the weight of that for the rest of my life. Please take care of yourself, Jacob. You deserve happiness, and I hope that one day you find peace. I won't contact you again. This is the last time I'll reach out. Emma. As I finished reading the letter, I sat there in stunned silence. The words felt like a punch to the chest, but in a strange way, they also felt like a release. Emma's apology, her regret, was raw, sincere, and full of self-awareness. For the first time in a long time, I could see that she had truly changed. But the question was, did it matter? Could I ever forgive her for what she had done? Could I ever let go of the pain she had caused? I didn't know the answers. I wasn't sure I wanted to know. I stared at the letter for a long time, unsure of what to do with it. Part of me wanted to call her, to demand answers, to ask why she had waited so long to send it. But another part of me knew that I had already moved on. I had rebuilt my life. I had found a sense of peace in Portland, and I wasn't sure I was ready to open the door to that past again. I folded the letter back up, placed it in the envelope, and put it aside. I didn't know what to do with it yet, but I knew one thing for sure: I wasn't going to let it consume me. I had already lived through the heartbreak of our marriage ending. I wasn't going to let Emma's words drag me back into a place of pain. The next few days were a blur. I found myself thinking about the letter more than I wanted to, but I kept it at the back of my mind, focusing on my work and my own healing. But deep down, I couldn't help but wonder why Emma had sent the letter now. Why after all this time? What had prompted her to reach out? I thought about how much time had passed since I left our home, how much I had changed. I had found a way to move forward, and while I wasn't perfect, I had built a life that I was proud of. I didn't need Emma's apology to validate me. I had learned to validate myself. But still, her words lingered in my mind. Several weeks went by, and I heard nothing more from Emma. I couldn't help but feel a sense of finality in her letter. She was gone from my life, and I was gone from hers. There were no more calls, no more attempts to reach out. She had closed the door, and so had I. But as the weeks turned into months, I began to realize something. Emma's letter had given me the closure I needed. I had been searching for answers, for some sort of reconciliation, but I had already found it within myself. I didn't need her to fix what had happened. I had done that on my own. Her apology, her regret, they were important, but they didn't define me. What defined me was the life I was building, the person I was becoming. It was at that point that I realized something important. I was ready for the future. I was ready to let go of the past completely and embrace whatever was next. The scar of my past would always be there, but it wouldn't control me. I had moved on, and I was proud of that. And so, I let the letter go. I never spoke to Emma again, and I never looked back. To be continued. Months had passed since I last heard from Emma. The letter had been a heavy but necessary weight to carry, and since reading it, I had managed to focus on the life I was rebuilding. The pain of the past had slowly faded into a scar, something I could acknowledge but no longer allow to control me. I found peace in Portland. I had friends, a new job I enjoyed, and a connection with Sarah that was slowly deepening. I had finally reached a place where I could breathe again, where the past no longer haunted me every waking hour. But then, one day, my phone rang, and everything shifted again. It was Emma. My heart raced as I saw her name on the screen. I hadn't expected this. I hadn't wanted it. Yet, in some strange way, I couldn't ignore it. I let it ring for a moment, my mind in turmoil. I hadn't spoken to her in months. What could she want now? I picked up the phone, my voice cautious. Hello? Jacob? Her voice was quiet, almost hesitant, like she wasn't sure how I would respond. Emma, I said, feeling the weight of her name on my tongue. What's going on? There was a long pause. I know it's been a while, and I never expected to hear from you again. But I've been thinking a lot. I need to see you. Just once, for closure. Not to ask for forgiveness, but to finally say goodbye properly. The words hit me like a wave. Closure. That's what she wanted. I could have told her no. I could have ended the call right then and there, chosen to stay firmly in the life I had rebuilt, the life I had worked so hard to create after the devastation she left behind. But something inside me hesitated. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was the hope that seeing her one last time would finally give me the peace I hadn't realized I still needed. All right, I said, before I could change my mind. Where and when? The day of our meeting, I was a bundle of nerves. I tried to shake off the feeling, but every part of me, my body, my mind, was telling me that seeing her again would be harder than I expected. I arrived at the hotel where she had asked to meet. I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know if she would look the same, if she would act the same. I didn't know if I was prepared to face her. When I walked into the lobby, I spotted her immediately. She was sitting by the window, her face turned towards the street as if waiting for something. She hadn't noticed me yet, but I noticed her. She looked different. It wasn't that she looked older or somehow changed physically, it was something else. There was a weariness in her eyes, a deep exhaustion that I hadn't seen before. I took a deep breath, walking toward her, unsure of what I was about to say or do. She turned when she heard me approach, her eyes meeting mine. For a moment, there was nothing but silence. Then she stood up. Her hands trembled slightly as she reached out to me. "Jacob," she whispered, almost as if she was surprised to see me standing in front of her. "Thank you for coming." I nodded but didn't speak at first. I was still processing everything, the way she looked, the way she said my name like it held so much history, like we were two people who used to be so familiar and now we were strangers. "I didn't know what to expect," I said, my voice more cold than I meant it to be. "But here we are." She smiled faintly, almost sadly. "I didn't know what to expect either," she admitted. "But I've been carrying this guilt, this weight for so long. I needed to face you, face what I did. I'm sorry, Jacob. I am." I swallowed hard, feeling the wave of emotions that I had worked so hard to push away come flooding back. The pain, the anger,